So I find it really interesting because oftentimes, the concept of being present is taught outside of our needs. And that's not really enough possible if we really think about it, because it's our needs that allows us to be present. Because a need is a present thing. It's actually what you need in this moment. Are you thirsty? Do you have a need for connection? Do you have this desire to work really hard? Do you want to go on a walk, or do you want to write your email? These are all things that actually are present right now. That's actually where our drive comes from. That's the drive to do anything comes from our needs. Do you want to sit down and rest? That's when you do it. And so our needs, as I was explaining, is actually what connects us to nature, our nature and all of nature. And so we're trying to learn how to be present, and we're teaching meditation and things like that, which are important. So I'm not saying like you shouldn't learn meditation, but we're learning it outside the concept of needs. And I feel that that's disconnecting us. It's actually conceptual. And so, you're learning how to take an aspect of who you are, such as like a lot of meditation, either, if you empty your mind, it becomes focus, you become present, and they're all actually really important. And you're supposed to learn it to become aware of what's going on with your system. And so if you actually learned it from that perspective, I think it's really good. And there are many traditions that teach that. You quiet your mind so that you become present to your own self and your body. And then all of a sudden the needs of your body come alive, and you can feel your emotions better. You can feel your aches and pains or the pleasure in your body better. And you start realizing that when your body's working fine, you experience pleasure. Comfort is a kind of pleasure. Relaxation is a kind of pleasure. So you have pleasures, and then you have the pains, the discomforts, or the lack of ease. Anything that doesn't feel good. Anything that doesn't feel good means that your body is not working like well. Or if you're feeling emotionally something, that means that something is lacking. It goes outside to your body, and it goes to kind of the environment, like relationships, or whether you want to do something. Like, let's say for instance, you need to chop some wood, but it's not going well and you're feeling frustrated. That means that that frustration means that when you're chopping, you want to be able to chop in a way that's more effortless, or you want to be able to be more effective, be better at it. You want to have a different experience. So emotions relate you to your own needs, to the environment itself, and the needs, if you will, of your environment. The tree has a certain need to grow in a certain way. The animals have a certain need. If you don't recognize the needs of an animal, it becomes really difficult to either take care of them or to hunt them if you need to. And so I'm just kind of giving nature examples to kind of really bring it home, that really everything operates out of our emotional needs and our instinctual needs. And actually, I'd like to also say our intellectual needs. Those are the three big needs that we have. There are also the three intelligences that we have, but there are also the three needs that we have. Your intellectual need, how do you want to be stimulated intellectually? What kind of emotional needs do you have, and what kind of instinctual needs do you have, right? And so the things that you find interesting are your intellectual needs, is the areas of growth and novelty that we typically want. And then the emotional needs, is how do you want to relate? What kind of a relationship do you want to have? And not just with people, but let's say for instance, anything that's in your environment. So it's really a relationship. It's really relating to anything. And that's why emotions are so important, because it's how we relate to all that is in our life, whether it's the divine, whether it's a stone, whatever it is. And so when I first learned it, I basically said, I was taught that your relationship with God actually impacts your relationship with everything else. And what I found is that it's actually the relating itself. So the relationship that you have with your emotions, isn't that interesting? You can actually have a relationship about your emotions. Let's say, for instance, if you feel ashamed, you feel angry that you're feeling shame. You're having feelings about your feelings. That means that you have a relationship with your own feelings. If you have a certain thoughts, do you judge yourself? That judging is a mental activity, but typically if you're judging, you're feeling shame. So if you're having a certain thought, do you feel shame? Because if you feel shame, then you're going to judge the thought that you had. So you're having thoughts about your thoughts, right? So it's about actually relating. And so the and it's kind of interesting because if you look at from a scriptural perspective, God's name is that which was, is, and is to come. In the scriptures, it talks about God's name as I am or is. So another way to talk about it is all that is, the way things are, is basically what we call divine. It's a really beautiful way. It's a poetic way to relate to everything, right? And so if everything is the way it is, and that is what is divine, then how you relate to how everything is in this moment and forevermore, however you want to look at it, but relating to all that is, how you relate to that defines your relationship with everything else. So how you relate to this moment and how you feel, how you relate to yourself is going to determine how you relate to everything else, of course, right? And so that concept is actually portrayed as that, the whatever you the measuring stick that you use to measure someone else or something else is going to be the same measuring stick that you use to measure your own self. And so what that means is that the way you judge everything else on the outside is a good measure to see how you measure yourself. So if you find yourself judgmental towards other people and you're really wanting to change that, notice how you judge yourself. And then as you notice that, you notice how you want to treat yourself differently. And as you notice how you want to treat yourself, as you start recognizing the need, again, your need. Oh, wow, okay, I was judgmental. I can tell that I was being judgmental because I had this need to have done this better. And so my real need is to do this better. Okay, now that I know that I wanted to do that better, I guess beating myself up over it wasn't actually really effective. And so because you recognize your need, you realize why you're beating yourself up. And as you recognize why you're beating yourself up, you actually start taking care of the need, which is you start focusing on how you could do this better. And so as you can see, your need and how you relate to your needs, how you relate to yourself actually really starts making all the difference and all the change. And so in short, if we really think about it, that the way we relate to our needs and or to the three needs that we have, our intellectual needs, our emotional needs, and our instinctual needs, that way we relate, how we relate to that actually determines how we relate to all else. And that's actually what we need in order to be able to meditate. So if we become present, we realize that we have the need to recognize what our needs are and how we want to relate to all else that is going on. And as we start being present with that, everything becomes apparent. But if you're trying to teach a person to just be present, apart from your needs, then how is that going to be? You're going to feel disconnected from everything because you're disconnected from the one thing that connects you to all things. Isn't that interesting to me? So you can language this many different ways. Because ironically, when you become present with your needs, you become selfless. And the reason, isn't a surprise? Isn't that a surprise? I think that's like a surprise. You would think that you become more self-centered, but you don't, because when you become present with your needs, you lose your idea of who you are. You just become present and your thoughts disappear and you just become present with all things and you just start attending to the needs that are common to all things, which is just nature, in a compassionate way, because you realize these are just natural things. And when things are natural, then you don't need to engage your personality to try and force something to happen. And so you transcend your ego self, what people call your ego self. And as you transcend your ego self, you just become present with all things. So learning how to be present outside of this is meaningless. And so I talked about, in the first 4 videos, I talked about being present. And then now I'm tying it to the needs and showing how they're tied to your needs. Because to me, talking about happiness, just by trying to learn how to be present for the sake of being present itself is meaningless. Because it doesn't connect us to anything. It doesn't connect us to ourselves. It doesn't connect us to the divine, if you will, to all things and beyond. It doesn't connect us to the people that we care. It doesn't connect us to anything. It has a chance to, and some people fall on there. But nowadays people teach how to meditate to be productive, and it works. The issue isn't that it doesn't work. The issue is that it works. And I feel like we're doing a disservice to actually the opportunity to become present to what matters most, which is our needs. And when I say our needs, I'm not just talking about your need. I'm talking about our needs. It's a collective need, isn't it? How are we gonna find a new kind of humanity unless we recognize that the needs that we have are collective needs? They are needs common to all. So, okay, thank you for that. Thank you for listening.